All right, so I want to talk about section 13.1 of chapter 13, which talks about cystic fibrosis. There's not any diagrams or anything here, but it's important to understand this. This is a great lead into our talk on genetics. So, cystic fibrosis is a fatal genetic disorder. In order to have this disorder, a person would have to inherit two recessive alleles for this. And when I talk about that, it's specifically at this CFTR gene. The CFTR gene is responsible for making a protein that helps with or actually doesn't help, it actively transports ions, chloride ions out of epithelial cells. Epithelial cells are your lining cells. So this would be like the inside of your mouth, your esophagus, inside the airways of your lungs. Even your skin is epithelial tissue. So this protein actually pumps chloride ions out of the cells. And what this does is it creates a hypertonic environment. And if you remember, hypertonic means that there's a higher solute concentration outside of the cell. So by pumping these chloride ions out, it causes water to follow suit. So the water will actually leave the cell. And this is important because it kind of hydrates outside of the cell and makes it a little bit more wet. I guess, you can say like a thin, watery film, I think is how your book describes it if I scroll down a little bit here. But this thin, watery environment allows mucus to move easily over the cells. And this is important because we're going to have a lot of, you don't want to build up a mucus. You want the mucus to run easily outside. But in cystic fibrosis, what happens is there's a deletion at the 508th amino acid. And this amino acid is phenylalanine. And what happens is because this protein is missing this one amino acid, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you remember on our discussion about proteins have to fold into a specific shape. And if they're not in that specific shape, they can't do their job. And the cell actually recognizes that this isn't folded correctly. And what happens is it destroys this protein. And then this protein isn't in the cell membrane. It isn't able to move the chloride ions outside of the cell, which doesn't create this hypertonic solution, which causes water to go out. So it actually causes the extracellular matrix is what it would actually be called. That's outside of the cell. It causes this area to be too dry. And because it's too dry, mucus builds up. So we can have a few problems actually arise from this. And one of the major ones is actually in the lungs. So because the mucus accumulates, it causes breathing problems. If you've ever had any like maybe bronchitis or hopefully not pneumonia, but if you have and you've had a buildup of mucus, you kind of have an idea of what's going on here. But this is chronic. This happens constantly. So mucus accumulates in the airways. It impedes breathing. It also in the lungs, the CFTR gene or the CFTR protein rather helps with alerting the immune system that there are bacteria present. So with no CFTR protein, the immune system isn't told that there are bacteria there. The bacteria are able to replicate unchecked. And a huge issue with people who have cystic fibrosis is that they have reoccurring, or I should say chronic bacterial infections in the lungs. And yeah, they can be treated with antibiotics, but there's a risk of many other things such as antibiotic resistance and so forth. In addition to the lung issues and the breathing issues, or I should say the lung infections and the breathing issues, there can be digestive issues as the ducts that lead into the gut get clogged, so certain things can't be transported properly. And males with this disorder are usually infertile due to blockages in the tubes that allow sperm to be transported out of the body. Um, Unfortunately, many people with this, I should say most people with this disorder, will die before the age of 30 because there is no cure. Oftentimes, the treatment involves a, a lung transplant, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes, well, first of all, even finding organs to be transplanted are few and far between. And then even if they are eligible to get one, they get a lung transplant. Sometimes the body just doesn't respond correctly. So this is a great way to kind of start off our inherited traits. And we will revisit this later in the chapter. So hopefully this helped you with understanding this first section of chapter 13.